Chapter 1. She's sitting across from you, scrolling her phone while you're mid-sentence, nodding just enough to look present, but not enough to actually be there. You clock it, but you don't say anything. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself she's just tired. You tell yourself you're being dramatic. Meanwhile, your chest tightens in that familiar way, the way it always does when you feel like you're auditioning for someone who already decided you're not the main act. You laugh something off, she smirks, and for a split second, you catch the look. Not admiration, not excitement, tolerance. And you hate that you recognize it so clearly because now you can't unsee it. You felt this before, even if you never put words to it. The subtle disrespect that never quite crosses a line but lives right up against it. The jokes that land just a little too sharp. The way she talks to you when she's annoyed versus how she talks about certain men she's never even met. You notice how her tone changes when she mentions celebrities, bosses, men she idealizes from a distance. There's a softness there, a reverence, a restraint. And then there's you. Familiar, comfortable, safe enough to poke, safe enough to test, safe enough to talk crazy to because she knows you'll swallow it. That contrast eats at you, not because you're insecure, but because it's honest. Because it tells you something about how she sees you that you've been trying not to acknowledge. This is where most men lie to themselves. They call it love. They call it compromise. They call it relationships being hard. They say things like, nobody's perfect, or she's just expressive, or that's just how women are. But deep down, you know the difference between a woman who genuinely values you and a woman who's settling into you. You know it by how much effort she puts in without being asked. You know it by how carefully she treats your feelings versus how casually she dismisses them. You know it by whether she's trying to impress you or trying to manage you. And most men never stop to ask themselves the most important question because the answer would force them to change everything. Does she actually like me, or does she just like what I provide? You've been trained to chase the woman you like, to prioritize how she looks, how she moves, how she makes you feel when you first meet her. Nobody ever taught you to stop and ask whether she likes you the same way. Nobody ever taught you that attraction is not symmetrical by default. You can be fully into a woman who is only partially into you. You can be invested while she's evaluating. You can be serious while she's entertaining. And when that imbalance exists, respect doesn't flow evenly. It never has. It never will. Because respect follows perceived value, not effort. And if she doesn't perceive you as someone she deeply admires, someone she would never risk losing, you will feel it in every interaction. This is the part that messes with men's heads. You'll hear a woman say she likes you. She'll even say she loves you. But liking someone and seeing someone as high value are not the same thing. Love without admiration turns into control. Liking without reverence turns into familiarity. And familiarity without respect breeds contempt, even when it's subtle, especially when it's subtle. You don't get yelled at. You don't get cheated on immediately. You just get slowly minimized. Your opinions matter less. Your boundaries get tested more. Your presence becomes optional. And the worst part is, you start adjusting to it. You start lowering your expectations because the alternative feels lonelier than staying where you are. You've seen how women act around men they truly admire. Not men they just tolerate. Not men they're unsure about. Men they look up to. Men they'd never dare embarrass or talk down to. Men they'd never casually disrespect because the cost feels too high. When a woman sees a man as a star in her eyes, she moves differently. She softens, she listens, she invests without keeping score. She goes out of her way because she wants to, not because she's obligated. That energy isn't reserved for celebrities only. That's the lie you've been fed. It's reserved for men she genuinely values. And if she doesn't treat you that way, it's because she doesn't see you that way. This is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront your own selection patterns. It means admitting that you might have chosen women based on how much you liked them, not how much they valued you. It means acknowledging that you ignored women who were genuinely into you because they didn't trigger the same visual excitement. It means realizing that you may have chased aesthetics over alignment, chemistry over character, fantasy over reality. And nobody wants to admit that because it makes you feel foolish. But avoiding that truth is exactly what keeps men stuck in relationships where they're constantly negotiating for basic respect. You tell yourself she's good. She doesn't cheat. She doesn't hit you. She does some nice things sometimes. But deep down, you know good isn't enough if it comes without admiration. You know that because if you were truly content, you wouldn't fantasize about being single. You wouldn't feel relief when she's not around. You wouldn't feel more like yourself away from her than with her. Those are signals you've been taught to ignore. Signals that say something is off at a foundational level. Not because she's a bad woman, but because she's not the right one for you. Or more accurately, because you're not the man she truly reveres. Here's the hard part that nobody likes to say out loud. A woman who doesn't see you as high value will eventually treat you like you're replaceable, even if she never actually replaces you. The way she speaks, the way she prioritizes, the way she withholds effort, all of it communicates the same message. I like you, but I don't fear losing you. And that message changes how power moves in the relationship. Suddenly, you're the one trying to earn what should be mutual. Suddenly, you're the one over-explaining, over-giving, overcompensating. And the more you do that, the less attractive you become in her eyes, because admiration cannot be begged for. It either exists or it doesn't. Most men have never been taught to look for attraction that comes from the soul. They've been taught to chase attraction that comes from the eyes, the surface, the facade, the packaging. And that's why so many relationships feel hollow even when they look good on paper. Because the woman isn't invested at a deep level. She's present, but she's not anchored. She's there, but she's not all in. And you feel that every time she speaks to you in a way she'd never speak to a man she truly admired. You feel it every time she minimizes your feelings or tests your patience. You feel it when you realize she's more excited about men she'll never meet than the man sitting right in front of her. You might be listening to this and thinking you've never heard this articulated before. That's not an accident. Men aren't taught to prioritize being admired. They're taught to pursue, to provide, to endure. Nobody tells you that respect is non-negotiable. Nobody tells you that being liked isn't enough. Nobody tells you that the woman who truly values you will make your life easier, not harder. She won't drain you. She won't confuse you. She won't leave you questioning where you stand. Her attraction will feel stabilizing, not destabilizing. Calm, not chaotic. Clear, not conditional. If this is landing uncomfortably, sit with that feeling. Don't rush to defend yourself or rationalize your past. Discomfort is usually the first sign that you're touching something real. If you've ever felt talked down to, dismissed, or subtly disrespected by a woman you were investing in, you're not crazy. You were just in a dynamic where admiration was missing. And no amount of effort can replace that. No amount of loyalty can manufacture it. No amount of patience can force someone to see you as something they don't already see you as. The next chapter digs deeper into why men keep choosing women who don't truly value them, and why the women who would actually treat them right often get overlooked. Chapter 2. You don't realize how deep the conditioning runs until you start questioning why your instincts keep pulling you toward the same type of woman over and over again. The ones who are beautiful enough to make you nervous, the ones who feel just slightly out of reach, the ones who don't fully choose you, but don't fully reject you either. That tension feels familiar. It feels exciting. It feels earned. And because nobody ever taught you to separate excitement from instability, you mistake the chase for chemistry and the anxiety for passion. What you were never taught is that desire without reciprocity turns into self-abandonment, slowly, quietly. You tell yourself you're being patient. You tell yourself she'll come around. You tell yourself relationships take work. But the work you're doing isn't building anything. It's convincing yourself to accept less than what you need while calling it maturity. And because this pattern is so common, you assume it's normal. You assume this is just how things are. Men chase, women decide, men adapt, women evaluate, and nobody stops to question whether that dynamic is actually producing respect or just training men to tolerate imbalance. The truth is, most men are wired to pursue what excites them visually and emotionally first. That's not a flaw. That's biology. But biology without discernment becomes a trap. You keep choosing women based on how much they activate you instead of how much they invest in you. And when those two things aren't aligned, the relationship starts tilted from the beginning. You're showing up with hunger. She's showing up with curiosity at best. And hunger always loses leverage to curiosity because curiosity can walk away without pain while hunger can't. This is why so many men ignore women who actually like them. The ones who check in, the ones who make space, the ones who don't play games. Those women feel too easy, too available, too calm. They don't trigger the same adrenaline. They don't make you feel like you're winning something by being chosen because they already chose you. And instead of recognizing that as security, you label it as boring. You tell yourself there's no spark. But what you're really saying is there's no anxiety. And because anxiety has been normalized as attraction, peace feels suspicious. Nobody ever sat you down and explained that admiration feels different than infatuation. Infatuation spikes. Admiration stabilizes. Infatuation keeps you guessing. Admiration makes you feel solid. Infatuation keeps you performing. Admiration makes you feel appreciated without trying. And if you've spent your entire dating life chasing infatuation, admiration can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like love because you've been taught that love hurts, that it's supposed to be dramatic, that it's supposed to keep you on edge. So when something shows up that doesn't demand that energy, you don't know how to receive it. This is how men end up living below their potential in relationships. They're chasing women who tolerate them instead of women who treasure them. And tolerance looks fine at first. It even feels like progress. She's there. She's present. She's not rejecting you outright. But tolerance never turns into reverence. It turns into familiarity. And familiarity without admiration turns into disrespect, even when it's subtle and dressed up as humor or honesty. You can feel the difference when a woman truly values you. She thinks before she speaks to you. She considers your feelings without being asked. She goes out of her way because she wants to, not because she's keeping score. She invests without resentment. And most importantly, she doesn't test you for entertainment. She doesn't poke at your boundaries just to see what she can get away with. Because when a woman admires you, she doesn't want to risk losing your respect. That fear doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from value. Men aren't taught to look for that. They're taught to look for beauty, chemistry, excitement. Nobody tells you that respect is the foundation that determines whether any of that lasts. Nobody tells you that the woman who truly values you will make your life feel lighter, not heavier. That being with her will feel like alignment, not negotiation. That you won't feel the need to constantly explain yourself, prove yourself, or earn basic decency. Those things just exist because she sees you clearly and doesn't want to disrupt that balance. Instead, men are fed a fantasy that if they work hard enough, provide enough, stay loyal enough, she'll eventually see their worth. That respect can be earned through endurance. That admiration is something you grind for. But admiration doesn't come from suffering. It comes from perception. And perception is formed early. Long before sacrifices are made, long before loyalty is tested. If she doesn't see you as a man she deeply values early on, time doesn't fix that. It just makes the imbalance more expensive. This is why so many men stay in relationships that feel draining but familiar. They've already invested too much to walk away easily. They've already built their identity around being chosen by this woman. Letting go feels like admitting failure. It feels like starting over. And because men are rarely encouraged to prioritize their own emotional well-being, they stay. They adapt. They tell themselves, it's not that bad. Until one day they wake up and realize they've been shrinking to fit someone else's limited perception of them. You might be realizing now that you've been denying yourself something better because you didn't even know to look for it. You weren't taught to look for admiration. You weren't taught to value being deeply liked. You were taught to pursue what you wanted and hope for the best. And hope is not a strategy. Hope doesn't protect you from disrespect. Hope doesn't create balance. Hope just delays the moment you have to confront the truth about how someone really sees you. There's a reason women who genuinely like you feel different. They don't make you feel like you're auditioning. They don't make you feel like you're one mistake away from losing everything. They don't keep you guessing where you stand. And because that dynamic doesn't activate your fear of loss, it can feel less intense. But intensity is not intimacy. Intensity is often just uncertainty dressed up as passion. Intimacy is consistency. It's safety. It's knowing you're valued without constantly checking for proof. If this is starting to shift how you think about your past relationships, that's not accidental. You're seeing the pattern instead of the people now. You're noticing how often you chased women who kept you just close enough to stay invested, but far enough to maintain control. And you're realizing how rarely you stop to ask whether the woman in front of you actually saw you as someone special, someone irreplaceable, someone worth protecting. That question changes everything once you start asking it. Stay with that realization. Don't rush to conclusions. Don't rush to judge yourself. Just observe. If this is connecting dots you never connected before, subscribe. And in the next chapter, we're going to confront the part most men avoid entirely. What it actually means to choose a woman who chooses you, and why doing that feels terrifying when you've been conditioned to chase instead of receive. Chapter 3. You feel it in your body before you can explain it in words. The moment you're around a woman who genuinely chooses you, not cautiously, not temporarily, but decisively, there's a strange calm that replaces the edge you're used to. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing slows. You're not performing. You're not scanning for approval. You're not calculating your next move. And instead of excitement, the first thing you feel is almost suspicion, like something must be wrong because it's not hard, because you're not chasing, because you're not being tested every 5 minutes to see how much disrespect you'll tolerate before you flinch. That reaction is conditioning, not intuition. It's what happens when your nervous system has been trained to associate attraction with instability. When peace shows up, it feels unfamiliar. When admiration is offered freely, it feels undeserved. When someone treats you with care without you earning it through struggle, you don't know where to put that energy. So you look for problems. You tell yourself she's too available. You tell yourself she's not challenging enough. You tell yourself something must be missing. But what's missing is the anxiety you've mistaken for desire your entire life. This is why choosing a woman who truly chooses you feels terrifying. You're used to proving yourself. You're used to earning affection through effort. You're used to being validated only after enduring discomfort. When that script disappears, you're left alone with yourself. And if you've tied your identity to being the guy who finally gets chosen by the woman who never quite valued him, letting that go feels like losing a version of yourself, even if that version was miserable. You don't realize how much ego is wrapped up in the chase until the chase ends. The chase gives you purpose. It gives you a storyline. It gives you a reason to keep pushing, even when the returns are low. When a woman chooses you freely, there's no storyline. There's no obstacle to overcome. There's no prize to win. There's just alignment. And alignment doesn't feed ego the way conquest does. It feeds stability. And stability feels boring to a man who's been surviving on adrenaline for years. This is where a lot of men self-sabotage. They finally meet a woman who values them deeply, and instead of relaxing into it, they create friction. They pull away. They test her. They downplay her effort. They tell themselves they're not ready. And eventually, they lose her. And later, when they look back, they don't miss her looks first. They miss how she treated them. They miss how safe they felt. They miss how much easier life was when they weren't constantly proving themselves. The hard truth is that men are rarely taught how to be chosen. They're taught how to pursue. They're taught how to win. They're taught how to endure rejection and keep going. Nobody teaches you how to sit in admiration without flinching. Nobody teaches you how to accept investment without feeling like you owe something back immediately. Nobody teaches you that a woman choosing you doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're valued. And if you've never been valued consistently, that can feel more threatening than rejection ever did. You start realizing how upside down the dating world has been for you when you notice how different your behavior becomes around a woman who truly likes you. You're not trying to impress her. You're not exaggerating your accomplishments. You're not managing her emotions. You're just yourself. And the fact that she likes you in that state forces you to confront something uncomfortable. Maybe you were always enough. Maybe the problem wasn't that you needed to become more. Maybe the problem was that you kept offering yourself to women who couldn't see what was already there. This is where the idea of attraction from the soul starts to make sense. It's not mystical. It's not spiritual fluff. It's practical. A woman who's attracted to you from her soul isn't evaluating you against a fantasy. She's not comparing you to celebrities or ideals or men she's never met. She's responding to who you are in real life, your values, your consistency, your presence, your leadership. And because her attraction is grounded in reality, her behavior reflects that grounding. She doesn't play games because she's not bored. She doesn't test you because she's not uncertain. She doesn't talk crazy to you because she respects you too much to risk the dynamic. Contrast that with a woman who only partially likes you. Her attraction is fragile, conditional, easily shaken. She's constantly recalibrating, constantly comparing, constantly wondering if there's something better. And that internal uncertainty shows up as disrespect, even if she doesn't intend it to. She pushes boundaries. She withholds affection. She talks to you in ways she'd never talk to a man she truly admired. Not because she's evil, but because her attraction doesn't anchor her behavior. It floats. And floating attraction creates instability for everyone involved. This is why so many men feel like they're walking on eggshells in relationships. They think they're being considerate. They think they're being patient. But what they're really doing is managing someone else's uncertainty. They're adjusting themselves to maintain an attraction that was never solid to begin with. And no amount of effort can make someone see you differently if their attraction was never rooted in admiration. You can't negotiate desire. You can't earn reverence through tolerance. You can't suffer your way into being valued. Choosing a woman who chooses you requires a different kind of strength than chasing ever did. It requires letting go of the validation you get from being wanted by someone who barely wants you. It requires releasing the fantasy that if you just try harder, she'll finally see you as exceptional. It requires trusting that the woman who already sees you clearly isn't settling, isn't desperate, isn't boring. She's aligned. And alignment doesn't create fireworks. It creates foundations. And foundations don't feel exciting until you realize how much chaos they prevent. There's a quiet power in being with a woman who's invested in you. She supports your growth instead of competing with it. She celebrates your wins instead of minimizing them. She contributes without being asked. And most importantly, she doesn't make you feel like your place in her life is up for debate. That certainty allows you to expand, to take risks, to lead, to be generous without fear, because you're not constantly worried about whether your efforts are being appreciated. You can feel the appreciation without it being announced. Men who've never experienced that often don't believe it exists. They think all relationships involve power struggles and emotional chess. They think disrespect is normal. They think being talked down to is just part of intimacy. But that's not intimacy. That's imbalance. And once you experience what it's like to be genuinely valued, not for what you provide, but for who you are, your tolerance for anything less evaporates. You don't become arrogant, you become clear. And clarity makes it impossible to go back to dynamics that require you to shrink. This is where the real selection happens. Not selecting based on looks alone, not selecting based on how much you like her, selecting based on how she treats you when she's comfortable, when she's upset, when she's stressed, when she has nothing to gain. Does she still respect you? Does she still invest? Does she still speak to you with care? Those moments reveal whether her attraction is surface level or soul level. And once you start choosing based on that, your entire relationship experience changes. If you're feeling a mix of relief and grief listening to this, that's normal. Relief because something finally makes sense. Grief because you realize how long you've been chasing the wrong thing. Let both exist. They don't cancel each other out. They move you forward. And if this chapter is making you rethink what you thought you wanted, share the video with someone who keeps confusing chaos for chemistry. Not to preach, to plant a seed. Stay with me, because in the final chapters, we're going to confront the last layer of resistance, the part of you that still believes you have to earn love through struggle, the part that equates being chosen with being worthy. That belief has cost men decades of peace, and once it breaks, you don't just choose better women, you choose a better life. Chapter 4. At some point, it clicks that the chase was never proof of your value. It was proof of your conditioning. You weren't pursuing because you wanted to. You were pursuing because you were taught that love, respect, and admiration only come after effort, patience, and sacrifice. That if something feels easy, it must not be real. That if a woman chooses you without resistance, she must be settling. That belief sits so deep in men that they don't even realize it's shaping every decision they make. They think they're following instinct, but they're following programming. You start seeing how backwards that programming is when you look at how respect actually works in the real world. People don't respect what has to beg. They don't revere what overextends. They don't admire what's always available without boundaries. Respect follows clarity, self-possession, and perceived value. And when a woman sees you as a man she genuinely admires, her behavior aligns automatically. You don't have to negotiate for basic decency. You don't have to explain why certain lines shouldn't be crossed. You don't have to remind her who you are. She already knows, and she acts accordingly. This is where men finally understand why some relationships feel effortless while others feel like constant work. It's not because one woman is perfect and another is flawed. It's because one dynamic is rooted in admiration and the other is rooted in imbalance. When admiration exists, effort feels mutual. When it doesn't, effort feels one-sided. You can dress it up however you want, but the body always knows the difference. You feel lighter in one, heavier in the other, more yourself in one, more cautious in the other. Those feelings aren't random, they're information. There's a quiet confidence that emerges when you stop needing to be liked by women who don't truly value you. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're just uninterested. The spark that used to pull you toward women who kept you guessing fades because you no longer confuse uncertainty with attraction. You start asking different questions. How does she treat me when she's upset? How does she speak to me when no one's watching? How does she invest when she doesn't have to? And if the answers don't align, you don't argue. You don't convince. You don't wait. You move on calmly. This is the part men fear the most. Walking away without drama, without a big reason, without a villain, just clarity. Because clarity doesn't give you the emotional payoff that chaos does. It doesn't give you a story where you're the hero who endured. It gives you responsibility. Responsibility to choose differently next time. Responsibility to stop entertaining dynamics that require you to shrink. Responsibility to accept that peace is allowed, even if you're not used to it yet. Once you've been with a woman who genuinely sees you as high value, your standards recalibrate permanently. Not in an arrogant way, in a grounded way. You no longer tolerate being talked to crazy. You no longer tolerate conditional affection. You no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as honesty. Not because you're fragile, but because you've experienced what it feels like to be with someone who would never do those things in the first place. Experience ruins excuses. Once you know better, you can't unknow it. You also realize how much potential you were leaving on the table by staying in dynamics that drained you. When you're not constantly managing someone else's uncertainty, you have more energy for your mission, your growth, your purpose. You lead more clearly. You think more strategically. You show up more fully. And ironically, that makes you even more attractive, not because you're trying to be, but because alignment sharpens everything. When your personal life isn't a source of stress, it becomes a source of strength. This is why the woman who chooses you from her soul feels so different. She's not competing with you. She's not testing you. She's not trying to extract validation from you. She's aligned with you. And alignment doesn't scream. It doesn't perform. It supports. It stabilizes. It amplifies. You feel like yourself around her, not a version of yourself that's constantly adjusting. That's the kind of relationship that builds men instead of breaking them down quietly over time. Most men never get taught to look for this, so they spend years chasing the wrong signal. They chase beauty without regard for behavior, chemistry without regard for character, excitement without regard for respect. And then they wonder why their relationships feel unbalanced, why they feel talked down to, why they feel more peaceful alone than with someone they supposedly love. The answer isn't that women are bad. The answer is that selection matters more than effort, and most men were never taught how to select properly. If you take anything from this, let it be this. The woman who truly values you will not make you feel small. She will not make you feel uncertain. She will not make you feel like you're competing with fantasies or men who don't exist in your real life. She will make you feel solid, seen, respected. And if a woman doesn't make you feel that way, no amount of patience or loyalty will turn her into someone who does. That's not cynicism. That's discernment. This isn't about rejecting women. It's about rejecting dynamics that require you to abandon yourself. It's about choosing the woman who already sees your worth, instead of trying to convince someone else to recognize it. And once you internalize that, relationships stop feeling like battles and start feeling like partnerships. You stop chasing validation and start building something real. Something stable, something aligned. If this video reframed how you look at attraction and respect, like it. Not because it's flattering, but because it's freeing. And if you want to keep sharpening your ability to choose women who actually choose you, subscribe. Not for dating tricks, for clarity. Because once you understand the difference between being liked and being valued, you stop settling for tolerance and start expecting reverence. And that expectation changes everything. Chapter 5. There's a moment that comes after all of this settles in, after the anger fades and the defensiveness drops, where you realize the real shift wasn't about women at all. It was about you finally seeing yourself clearly, not through the eyes of someone who barely valued you, not through comparison, not through fantasy, but through alignment. You realize how long you let someone else's limited perception define what you thought you deserved, and that realization doesn't make you angry anymore. It makes you quiet, focused, grounded in a way you weren't before. You start replaying moments from past relationships, not to punish yourself, but to understand. The times you felt disrespected and brushed it off, the times you felt like you had to earn basic kindness, the times you felt relief when you were alone instead of with the woman you were supposedly building with. You see now that those weren't random feelings, they were signals. Signals you ignored because you were taught that wanting more was entitlement and that accepting less was maturity. But maturity isn't tolerance. Maturity is discernment. And discernment requires you to believe that what you feel matters, This is where your standards quietly change, not because you're trying to be difficult, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you now understand the cost of ignoring misalignment. You understand that attraction without respect creates imbalance, that chemistry without admiration creates chaos, that being liked without being valued creates resentment on both sides. And once you understand that, you stop asking women to be something they're not. You stop hoping they'll change how they see you. You start selecting based on how they already treat you when nothing is at stake. You also stop romanticizing disrespect. You stop calling it passion. You stop calling it honesty. You stop calling it strong personality. You see it for what it is, a lack of reverence. And reverence is non-negotiable if you want a relationship that builds you instead of draining you. You don't need to be worshipped. You don't need to be idealized. You need to be respected at a level where basic dignity isn't up for debate. And the woman who truly values you doesn't struggle with that. It comes naturally to her because it's rooted in how she sees you, not how hard you try. This is the part where men often ask the wrong question. They ask how to make women see them differently, how to increase their value, how to command respect. But respect isn't commanded. It's reflected. It comes from choosing environments where your value is already recognized. It comes from removing yourself from dynamics where you're constantly negotiating your worth. You don't argue your way into admiration. You don't perform your way into reverence. You align with people who already see you clearly. You notice how different your energy becomes when you stop chasing validation. You're not guarded, but you're not desperate. You're not cold, but you're not overinvested. You show up as yourself without editing. And ironically, that makes you more attractive than all the effort you used to put in. Because effort without alignment feels heavy. Presence without need feels solid. And solidity is what most women actually respond to long term, even if they don't articulate it that way. You also begin to recognize the women you overlooked before, the ones who showed interest early and consistently, the ones who treated you with care without games, the ones who didn't make you feel like you were auditioning. And you understand now why you dismissed them, not because they weren't attractive, but because they didn't activate the part of you that needed to prove something. They didn't feed the identity you built around being the man who finally wins over the woman who doesn't quite want him. And letting go of that identity feels like letting go of struggle itself, which is terrifying when struggle has been your default. There's a humility in this realization, not the performative kind, the honest kind. You admit that you chased the wrong things, that you confused desire with value, that you ignored behavior in favor of appearance, that you prioritized being chosen by women who barely chose you over building something stable with women who actually would have. That admission doesn't make you weak. It makes you accurate, and accuracy is power. You don't walk away from this conversation with bitterness toward women. You walk away with responsibility. Responsibility to choose better. Responsibility to stop rewarding disrespect with attention. Responsibility to stop investing in dynamics that don't invest back. Responsibility to protect your peace the same way you protect your ambitions. And once you take that responsibility seriously, relationships stop being a source of confusion. They become a reflection of your standards. You start understanding why men who are truly respected don't talk much about respect. They don't have to. It's baked into their lives, into who they choose, into what they tolerate, into how quickly they walk away from misalignment without trying to fix it. They don't argue with women who don't see their value. They simply don't stay. And that's not arrogance. That's self-respect expressed through action instead of words. At this stage, you're no longer impressed by surface-level attraction alone. Beauty still matters, but it's not the deciding factor. You're watching how she moves when she's comfortable, how she speaks when she's frustrated, how she invests when there's nothing in it for her. You're paying attention to whether she treats you like someone she's proud to be with or someone she's settling for. And if the answer isn't clear, you don't guess, you observe. Because ambiguity in how a woman treats you is already an answer. This clarity also changes how you see yourself. You stop needing to be seen as special by everyone. You only need to be valued by the person you choose to build with. And that shift is freeing. You're not chasing validation. You're not proving anything. You're living in alignment with what you know you deserve. And alignment doesn't make noise. It creates stability. The kind of stability that allows you to grow without constantly looking over your shoulder emotionally. If you've stayed through this entire conversation, it's because something in you recognized the truth before your mind fully caught up. You've lived this. You've felt it. You just didn't have the language for it. Now you do. And language changes behavior. It sharpens perception. It helps you see patterns instead of isolated experiences. And once you see the pattern, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to chasing tolerance and calling it love. If this video gave you clarity where there used to be confusion, like it. Not because it agrees with everything you've done, but because it helps you do better going forward. And if you want to keep building a life where your relationships feel like support instead of resistance, subscribe. Not for dating tricks, for discernment. Because the moment you stop chasing women who barely like you and start choosing women who genuinely value you, everything balances out. Not just your relationships, your entire life.